I think we're live. Hi everyone, this is Sahiti Penna. I lead strategy and ops at Pivot. Here we are with another episode of Pivot in Progress. This Today we are talking about anti-immigration trends and the implications for um, global professionals and how do we tackle them. With me, I will be joined by Arjun Prakash, who's the founder at Pivot. At Pivot, we help professionals across the world navigate their uh, professions, tackle any of the challenges they're facing, and demystify the challenges that they're facing in their careers. Um, Hi, Arjun. Welcome to the podcast again. Um, I
Yes,
I'll
thank you.
give a brief introduction about Arjun. Arjun has helped 8,000 plus student professionals across the world navigate their careers, and you've actually worked personally with all of them, helping them in their career transitions and finding the right job and right fit in the industry they've worked in. So
Mhm.
today we are actually talking about anti-immigration trends in the US, Europe, and what it means for professionals across the world. Um, Over to you.
Yeah,
Anything you want
absolutely.
to?
Thanks for teeing up the topic, and glad to have you as part of Pivot in Progress as well, Sahiti. I think we've been doing these slightly different takes on similar career topics
Yeah,
where we bring more depth, more insights with regard to our experience at Pivot dealing with mid-career professionals, helping them navigate tricky career situations similar to the ones that many immigrants today are experiencing across US and Europe.
yeah,
Um, I and you, I mean, the good thing about this particular forum right now is that both of us have worked in India and in US and have the experience of transitioning from international country back to India, which I think is a topic on many immigrants' mind right now. I have a whole community of friends in the US diaspora
yeah.
where I know that many people are feeling at risk or they have been laid off or they are not able to find jobs after after graduation recently. So I think this is a very timely and pertinent topic. Excited to
Yeah.
dive more deep
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah, especially with the new changes in the H-1B policy that have been just introduced this week as we speak.
Yeah.
The new changes mean that any new US petitions would come with a price tag of $100,000. That
Mhm.
changes a lot of things. I think there have been proposed changes as part of the H1B changes as well. We'll go into some of that, and we'll mostly focus on implications of that for professionals in the US or anywhere else who are actually trying to um, navigate that change. What does that mean
Right.
for them? So I think we have a list of questions, and we're also welcoming any questions from our participants, any of the folks
Yes,
joining us.
absolutely.
Please leave your questions in the chat box, and we'll pick them up. Um, all right. So I think the first question that I want to, touch upon is from a career perspective, right? How do you think that the how do you think the recent H1B changes actually shift the way professionals should think about their next move? Like, what do you think changes?
Yeah, I mean that's the $100,000 question, right? Um, I think right now there's just firstly so much unsettled dust out there where yes, thankfully, there's been more clarity from the administration in the recent days. But and I know when it first came out, there was just tremendous amount of panic and chaos.
Yeah,
People were sharing every single article they read on LinkedIn and on other social media platforms, which exacerbated the confusion. Um, I'll give one example. I think we were discussing this the other day. I know myself certain people who had travel plans for around the last weekend to leave US while they were on H1B, and
yeah,
they had to cancel those travel plans while they was literally midway on the runway,
yeah,
right? they made the pilots stop the flight, got off the flight, so they didn't take any chance with their careers.
Yeah.
Now they realized in retrospect that the rule actually did not apply to them. It's
Yeah.
only for new petitions, it's
Yeah.
not for existing petitions, right?
Yeah.
This is just one of many examples where we have seen that when you have incomplete information or misinformation being peddled in the market by the likes of LinkedIn content creators or other less kind of thoughtful people who are not really thinking through the implications of what sharing half baked knowledge is. I
Yeah.
think that can have severe consequences on people's lives and their careers.
Yeah.
And first, I want to just take a moment to ensure that people know that anything that we discuss during this session, we are not giving you any legal or immigration advice. We are primarily thinking about the scenarios that you might find yourself in the current state of affairs, and
Yeah.
how do you tackle those difficult scenarios. For example,
Exactly.
not being able to find a job in US, moving back to India, or moving back to a different country,
Yeah.
right? So I think the thing to really focus on, Saiti, to answer your question right now is understand what are all your options currently,
Hmm.
and not be complacent about what has worked in the past for you will continue to work for you in the future.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the past, let's say if you worked at the Mang companies, the Metas and Apples and Amazons of the world, your career was quite secure, right?
Yeah.
We saw that kind of fall through the cracks over the last couple of years since these companies started doing layoffs extremely aggressively, and they continue to do that. There is no end in sight, at least from my perspective, right?
Yeah.
And from what the CEOs and leadership teams of these companies have shared in public.
Yeah.
Because of that uncertainty, things were already a bit dicey for many of the immigrants because of the layoff situation, right? This new $100,000 rule that has come up, it adds to this uncertainty, in my view, significantly, because now it's not just about the existing workers in US or in UK or other international countries. It's about the new folks who will be thinking about
Yeah.
applying to jobs in these
Yeah.
countries, or students who are already there in US
In the US.
thinking they have to recoup their investment on the education bit.
Yeah.
So you have to take stock of what all possibilities are there, right? um, New rules can also come up which we have not thought of. There, I think you and I were discussing backstage, there are some new proposals which
Yeah.
if they go through, they will have new implications that
Yeah.
people will have to think about.
Yeah.
So to me, I think you have to take stock of the situation and not feel complacent that okay, if I have been secure in my job previously, and if I'm a good, hardworking professional driving tangible results, I'm safe.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're not anymore. And you have to think about plan B and plan C's, which could mean either leaving the country where you are, whether it's US or Europe, and going back to your home country, where obviously, you will not have at least those kind of immigration related risks. Or you might want to think of other more immigration friendly countries where there have been less this such punitive legislation around immigrants,
Yeah.
working immigrants, right? So I think these are some of the main options. Apart from that, obviously, if you feel like you have been wrongly fired or wrongly let go, that can also happen in these situations. So
Yeah.
you can, because of the confusion, right? Employers are also
Yeah.
confused how they have to deal with it. So
Absolutely.
sometimes your situation can be extremely like person specific, case specific, in
Yeah.
which case I would highly suggest that you speak to an immigration specialist or a lawyer who
Yeah.
can advise you based on your specific fact pattern, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I think this is the initial bit what I think people should be thinking about in such situations.
Yeah. So I hear that first thing is that listen to legal advice that is coming from the right sources. Do not fall prey to any of the rumors or opinions that you might see on social media. Seek legal advice. Second is that I think you touched upon the right thing, that we need to now prepare ourselves towards whatever might happen. That means having contingencies in place, having plan B, plan C set out.
Mm-hmm.
Do your research and prepare yourself for some other alternatives. And I think the third is that you seek them out actively, prepare yourself for it.
Mhm.
And if you have any of the other tricky situations in your professional life, speak to a lawyer. Um,
Yeah.
and for
Yeah, I mean,
everything
see,
else,
I think there's a good point that you just raised, right? The last part where, if you're in a tricky situation. So, one of the things that could happen and I have seen happen is that you might be on an H-1B, but you really can't leave the country. Like
yeah,
you need to stay in US. Maybe you have, a significant other in
yeah,
US who cannot leave US, and for them you have to stay back, right?
yeah,
There could be other things, right, where you are quite certain that you want to build your life in
yeah,
the country where you are and you don't want to leave. So it's not always that, so there was this kind of barrage of posts on LinkedIn, especially from Indian based influencers, even folks who have returned to India like myself, who basically painted a very rosy picture that,
yeah,
oh, this is a great development for
yeah,
India, and we'll
yeah,
get all the top talent back, and India is booming, which is great. I mean, I partially agree with the fact that India is booming and there are a lot of good opportunities for people who might want to come back. But I mean, if you really look at the ground level stories, right? If you have lived through an international education or working experience, it's not that straightforward
it's
that
not.
you just say, okay, I'll
Yeah,
pack my bags and leave the country.
true.
If you've spent 5, 10 years and you feel more acclimatized or better at home in US or in UK, you might want to stay for yourself or for other people who have become part of your new
Yeah,
community, right? So you then need to think about what are the visa implications. Like sometimes if people, I mean, I'll share a very simple example. I know that many people are either dating or about to marry, let's say somebody who's a US citizen, but they're currently on H-1B, right? So for these people, it's not that easy to just pack their bags and leave. They might be even engaged and they might be on a fiance, like applying to a fiance visa and those kind of things. So while we may think this is a very extreme outlier situation, but
yeah,
I myself know at least 3 people like this, right?
yeah,
If I know 3 people, I'm sure there are hundreds of people in this
yeah,
situation, right? So for these people, you need to think about like, okay, will I continue in H1B the way it is, and not fear any of the risks that are associated with an H1B today, or should I expedite, getting, let's say, a green card through a relationship based visa or something like that? So there are many different permutation combinations, which is why I think talking to an attorney who specializes in immigration laws would be very helpful for these specific situations.
yeah, absolutely. And I think immigration is such a personal, choice, and moving or not moving to another country, whether it be your home country or some other country, is such a personal choice based on so many different
Right.
factors that you cannot just outline it for everyone and say that come back home. It's not
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah.
And there are different immigration pathways right now. I think there are a lot of expert visas. I think there's O1 visa that people can always explore. So,
Hmm.
right, speaking to the right legal advisor will set them up for a more informed decision, I think.
Hmm.
That is also one
Yeah.
of the conclusions we have. Great. Um, I think I'll move on to the other question I had, which was what kind of roadblocks or risks do you think these evolving rules are creating for career mobility, especially for mid-career professionals or senior level professionals? What are the roadblocks or risks that are being introduced, and how can they overcome them? Um,
Yeah, I think, see, mainly, if you think about it, most of the people who travel internationally for work or for education, they generally used to do it, at least historically, to stay within that new country,
yeah,
historically, right?
yeah,
Because you're making a major investment, you're spending a lot of money and time in these new places.
absolutely.
And if you come back to India, chances are you won't be able to recover that investment very easily, and sometimes you may actually not be even the right fit. And I'm sure, Saiti, you and I will discuss our transitions and the challenges we faced kind of acclimatizing back into India
Yeah,
after working internationally, right? It's not the most straightforward things to do.
it is not.
um, but I mean, before we get there, I think people go in with the mindset of working in the new country. Now, the biggest issue that has come up in recent times with all the layoffs, the tariff rules that are coming up, which are impacting inter-country relationships
Yeah.
significantly, right? And the new immigration visa related rules that are being rolled out very, very aggressively and very frequently now
Yeah.
across the world. So all of these are pointing to the rise of nationalism and an anti-immigration culture in many of the countries that have historically been very liberal and open to immigrants, right? Now, like I said at the beginning of this conversation, I think the jury is still out, right?
Yeah.
We don't know where the dust is going to settle for sure, but the current trends are pointing that the prior trends will not stay the way they were. They're going to change significantly. So, in terms of career mobility, that mindset that people had, that if I'm going to go into a new country for education or for some work experience, like I know people who used to come here for workshops in US and then stay back for like 3 months trying to find a job
Yeah.
because they could stay back for 3 months, right? Even in a tourist visa. So I think those kind of things will not work anymore, right? You can't just have a default mindset that if I'm going to get education or if I want international exposure, I will be building my career in the foreseeable future in that country. You will have to think about your, like I said, plan B or plan C. And working in your home country should always be a backup option, right? Um, we'll dive into the details of why that's also not always straightforward, because if your country's job market is challenging, if you
Yeah.
don't have a recent experience in your local job market, so employers might think that you're not well aware of the regional trends, and they might prefer the local candidates over you. Compensation can be an issue. So I mean, those are all the things that can be a hindrance in terms of career mobility back home to to your domestic country, right? I think people also need to think about perhaps remote work situations a little more because of this. So what we have seen is there was a huge spike in US and European companies hiring Indian workers remotely
Yeah.
when COVID had just happened, right? They were seeing it as a win-win because anyways nobody was going into work, right? It was work from home, and companies were able to save tremendous amount of costs because they migrated from US based workforce to, let's say, India based workforce. um, Recently, I'm sure you're aware, we've been seeing the rise of GCCs in India, where a lot of foreign companies, especially US based companies, they are setting up their global capability centers in India.
Yeah.
And this time, they're not just setting it as a back office, they're setting it as innovation centers, as core revenue generation centers as well.
Yeah.
So we have actually done a couple of these PIP sessions on GCC's rise as well. So I hope people can take a look at that on our YouTube channel. But the reason I'm discussing this is because a lot of time when people initially thought, oh, I have to work in in my target international country, US, UK, today you might also want to consider opportunities which are remote, opportunities which are, in setups like GCCs or India-based arms of the international companies. The pay may not completely match, but the overall, I would say, when you adjust it for cost of living, it
Yeah.
would be quite significant,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
very much like matching the international standards as well.
Yeah.
So I think those opportunities are going to become more uh, frequent and more prevalent in the coming times, in my view.
So I hear that we professionals need to maybe seek out remote opportunities, seek out opportunities with GCCs in their own home country.
Mhm.
Especially if you're from India, there've been global companies setting up their innovation centers here. Apart from the
Mhm.
startups, we've had a huge growth in bigger companies actually setting up their uh, core um, core research and development centers
Right,
here. So it's not just a back office like it used to be in the early 2000s and
right.
late 2000s. We're having much of our workforce work on strategic and innovative stuff. So
Yeah.
those are great points. I want to touch upon this, and then we'll move on to some of the things that you've already mentioned. The other thing, just before we move to the things that you mentioned, I want to kind of quickly touch upon what are the mindset shifts that people need to have when you are actually navigating these external policies that are usually outside your control. Like you
Yeah.
and I have been through these transitions, and they are not easy.
Yeah.
And I think these need to be talked about, because they come at you, and unless you know how to handle them, it might be difficult because you've otherwise probably not handled them in your professional career. So how do
Right.
you, what are some of the mindset shifts that you think are helpful for
Yeah, happy to share. And then I would love to hear from you as well, Saiti, given that you have had that journey yourself. Um, See, I think the first thing people are worried about is the overall lack of stability and insecurity, right? From a job perspective. Now, earlier people used to feel much safer when things were more traditionally handled, up till I would say probably 2019.
yeah
Since 2020, COVID and other global wars, inflation, and now you have tariffs, then you have immigration rule changes. So there's always something or the other in the last 5 years that has been fairly significant trend
yeah
that has appended what used to work well earlier, right? Or what used to at least be the norm earlier. So those
yeah
norms are being changed and the rules are being rewritten as we
yeah
speak. And the end is not in sight. That's the
yeah
other thing. So there's a lot of this feeling of um being unsure that if my career is safe, if I'm going to continue to hold on to my job or find a new job in case I get laid off, right? If I'm going to be even allowed to stay in the same country. So when you are dealing with so much uncertainty, right, you have to know that there are going to be certain things out of your control. No
yeah
matter what you do, you can't control them. Like visa laws is not something you can control,
yeah
right? But there are at the same time going to be certain things that you can control, right?
yeah
And in terms of mindset, what I feel people fret the most, they feel more stressed out and anxious about, is when they focus too much on things they can't control, right?
absolutely
Because you can't change that. So if a visa law is impacting you and you continue to just think about, okay, what can I do to circumvent this through a loophole or something like that, sure, maybe it will help you. But if you just dwell too much on things which are outside your control, I think that causes a lot of anxiety. So for me, in such situations, you have to figure out what are the controllable variables and uncontrollable variables, and the controllable variables are where you want to focus on, right?
yeah
So that's why we started this conversation by saying, taking stock of what your options are rather than only fixating on one option.
yeah
You need to think about adapting to
yeah
different potential options which you may not have thought of initially,
yeah
right? um, I think being a little flexible helps, not just deal with the situation better, but
yeah
it gives you a sense of control and some calm and peace in your life.
yeah
Because otherwise, you will feel always beholden to whatever is happening around you without having any control over your career or your life. You know,
yeah
I think the second thing, which is slightly more tricky in my view, Saiti, is your financial situation, right? So your mindset has a lot to do with your how your finances are, right? We
absolutely
all want to be safe and secure financially. Now, safe and secure, to be honest, doesn't necessarily mean that you're just making your ends meet as it used to mean. Today people live expensive lifestyles, right? They
yeah
have EMIs, they have many other responsibilities, liabilities that they need to take care of. So sometimes, let's say if I'm earning in dollars, right, and suddenly I have to leave the country because of layoff, because of visa rule changes, and the only option I have is to go back to my home country where the pay is like a fraction of what I have been earning. That can require significant mindset shift from
yeah
a lifestyle perspective, right?
absolutely
um, and I mean, I know we both have had to deal with similar situations, but I think you need to have a buffer much more than it was needed earlier today because of increasing uncertainty. So earlier, if you were saving, let's say, 3 months of your salary or 4 months of your salary, I would advise having at the minimum a 6 month salary buffer, up to a 12 month, because finding a new job, especially in new countries, can take longer than you think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you should have a, as they say, a rainy day fund. And it's becoming more and more common. The other thing is thinking about a portfolio career, meaning you have multiple income streams, not just depending on your mainstream job, but think about whether you're making investments, whether you are, deriving content through like side gigs that you're doing on a part-time basis or a freelance basis. So yeah, I mean, some of the new age trends are in, having strong savings and also thinking about diversifying income streams.
Yeah, good points there. Actually, they these kind of really help be flexible, because there is a correlation between your financial position and how flexible you can be, or how open to options you can be. It's always a
Yeah.
mindset influencer in a way.
Yeah. So, Saidi, how did you? I mean, you have gone through a journey where you worked in US and came back to India, and I think you worked in Europe as well for a bit.
Yeah,
So, I mean, you've sort of experienced all the different flavors that
yeah.
people in this current conversation might be experiencing. So, how did you navigate all this movement back and forth?
I think if I were to say that it was easy, I would definitely be lying. It wasn't easy when I was going through it. But I think what helped me in, while going through it is the acceptance of. So, to give you a little bit of a preview of why I transitioned, it was because of the H1B lottery, things that were not exactly in my control. Now, when that happens, you definitely feel when uncertainty happens to you, you feel anxious, because you feel anxious when you are faced with uncertain situations where things are not in your control, and you cannot do much about them. So I think what helped me during that journey of moving back to India, finding the next best role for me, a new role for me, was first is acceptance of the entire situation. I was pretty accepting of that. Um, I was definitely, concerned, because this was back in 2015, before many of the, right now it's much better. It's a great time to be in India with startups and with GCC setup. Wasn't that much of a case then. But I think what helped was relying on some of my strengths back from the role I was in, and applying them to be in a new role. So back in the US, I was working on embedded software, but when I moved to India, I couldn't find many embedded software companies. So I decided to apply those skills towards actually learning uh, and being open to work in newer areas. So I worked in data storage with Dell EMC, and that kind of opened up many new possibilities. I think the thing that helped me during that transition was the ability to be open minded, to the ability to be a little flexible, and consider that as a journey that will bring resilience in me.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that kind of helped me
Yeah.
through both of the transitions from US back to India and then UK back to India. The second time around, it was a little easier, but
Yeah.
I think when you accept circumstances and then you find newer possibilities, I think what happens as a result of uh, being accepting of certain circumstances is you develop this muscle of uncovering new possibilities for yourself. So that
Yeah.
mindset you mentioned earlier of not being rigid,
Yeah.
not think
Being adaptive to the
being
situation.
adaptive, and careers now are so adaptive. You can transition from one field to another much more easily than generations earlier used to do.
Yeah.
So considering that was definitely helpful in my career.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, one of the things I think, a lot of people don't figure out until much later is, always having a ready to leverage network
Yeah.
in different countries where you might want to work, right?
Yeah.
Especially your home country. Obviously, we are talking about immigrants. So, right now, we would assume that most of the people listening to this conversation are outside their home country.
Yeah.
And, one of the considerations on their mind would be going to a different country, either back home, India, or somewhere else. And I think, when I was undergoing my transition from US to India, I mean, one of the things was that I had never worked in India before that, right? So
Yeah.
my network in India was very limited to just family and friends, not any ex-colleagues, clients, or professional,
Yeah.
network. And so initially, I thought the job market would work similar to how it worked in US. You apply to jobs on portals. At least back then, this was 2018. LinkedIn used to work.
Yeah.
Today we have a different type of situation.
Yeah.
But I thought, okay, if you're applying to jobs on LinkedIn or Naukri or these kind of portals, you would hear back after some time and then you would land a job. And I don't think it was just me, although it could have been slightly unique experience, wherein I probably applied to like 30, 40 jobs at that time. And I knew that my experience and my credentials were fairly solid, but I didn't get even a single interview at that time. And this was not when the market was that crowded,
Hmm.
like the way it is today,
Yeah.
right? Um, and instead, I started getting calls from people at these large job portals trying to sell me services,
Yeah.
which felt very aggressive sales tactic kind of a thing. So after a certain point, I just got a bit fed up of
Hmm.
being trying to sold to, not getting any responses on my applications, being ghosted most of the time. And that's when I realized, okay, you can't expect the right results through the same approach over and
Yeah.
over. So I decided to then focus on networking, right? And I had to really think hard about how to leverage my network because most of my network was in US. So one of the things I did was figure out who I knew in my US network who had worked in India
Yeah.
before,
That
right? Because
always.
there's correct, because
Yeah.
there are many people who transition for masters and they
Yeah.
have worked previously in India, right? So fortunately, I knew maybe like two or three people at least at that time like
Yeah.
this, and just reached out to them, had a quick coffee chat. I mean, a lot of them did advise me don't leave US at the time. Again, it was 2018. Most people were not leaving at that time. But I mean, I had my personal reasons to leave, for family reasons and all. So I pushed through, and that strategy, the network, really changed the entire game.
Yeah.
Wherein within 1 month of me starting that strategy, I had three offers on the
Wow.
table,
That's.
right? And
Wow.
this is an industry, yeah, this is an industry, just for context, which does not really have many people working in India. There are probably less than, I would say, literally 200 people in India who work in that industry,
Hmm.
right? Very niche, very small. So there are not that many opportunities, but I was able to get three good offers within just a span of 1 month. And that showed me for the first time the power of your network,
Yeah.
especially when you're transitioning. But the one thing that I would suggest to people is, see, back then things were different. Today, people are being bombarded with such requests. Can you help me with my job transition? So you need to be prepared in advance for that. If you're desperate and you need immediate help, it can sometimes
Be very.
backfire or be
Yeah.
possible. Yeah?
Yeah.
Because today people are getting very overwhelmed with this inbound requests of can you refer me, can you help me,
Yeah.
and they can't just they don't nobody has the bandwidth to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think networking is powerful, but at the same time, it's becoming much more complicated. So I
Mhm.
think what helps is kind of building that network over a period of time. So
Yes.
if you're even thinking of transitioning out of your current place, current residence country, um, 1 year down the line, start now. Start networking with folks that are in your target country, back home or any other country, right now.
Yeah.
Reach out to them. Many mentorship platforms. We provide a strong mentorship platform at Pivot, and we've seen the power of mentorship, guidance. I think to actually come back to my own experience, I have felt the same actually.
Yeah.
One of the things that really helped were connecting with. I was in a similar boat like you. Had no network that I could actually rely on because I moved to the US for my master's immediately after my bachelor. So although I had some of my bachelor's friends and batchmates, but not a significant professional network that I could rely on. Many of
Yeah.
the folks I knew back in the US who had worked or who had connections, they helped me, helped me navigate this entire thing. So, which
Right.
brings me to the next question: what are some of the roadblocks that the professionals moving back to their home countries or any new countries can face? It can be. I think there are many things to touch upon in this part of
Sure.
the question, but let's start at wherever you
Yeah.
want to tackle
Yeah,
it.
I think, see, first thing we have already discussed, there are going to be people who would not have a strong network
Yeah,
back in India. Even if they have the network, they may not have been stayed in touch with them, and so you lose uh, key relationships that you can depend on. So one of the things is the cardinal rule of 20, like the 2025 and go forward career development is having a strong network. And strong network is not knowing 30 people, 50, 100 people.
yeah,
It's about knowing maybe even 10 people, maximum 15 people, who actually will be helping you in a tangible manner, meaning they will actually stick their neck out for you, provide good references, opportunities, just somebody who you can rely on.
or
So
even interviewing tips, because I mean interviewing in any new countries is totally different. So even
yeah,
interview
yeah.
tips.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we do well at Pivot when it comes to these kind of inter-country, intercontinental transitions is we connect our clients to people who are working in their target countries, whether it's in a new country or back home, so that you can get a very strong understanding of the regional trends, whether it's interview tips, which is absolutely true, but even the work culture,
Yeah,
the different industry dynamics and trends. So, for example, like if you're thinking about consumer sector in US versus India, it's vastly different, right? The
yeah,
quick commerce sector in India, the way it works with 10-minute, 20-minute delivery, doesn't really exist in US. Even the
yeah,
UPI technology that's in India does not exist in US, right? So there are many local things that you might not be aware of when if you're transitioning from, let's say, US or Europe back to India. You need to be able to I mean, first thing is networking so that you can get references, job opportunities, but the network also helps you get on ground understanding of what is the reality in
yeah,
that market, right?
yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's much better than just googling it or reading about it, because those people are working day in day out within those circumstances. So rather than just doing theoretical research, I think it's always better to get practical know-how and feedback from somebody who's living that
Yeah,
particular role or that situation. So I think leveraging network for um, gaining understanding of regional context is very, very important, definitely.
yeah,
And many people don't do that when they are initially thinking about transitioning, because they think, oh, I'm in a product manager role in US, I can do a product manager role in India,
yeah.
right? What's the difference? It's the same thing.
This,
Yes, you might know the concepts and frameworks, and
yeah,
you might be really good at it. And if you have, let's say, Ivy League background, perhaps you will get a lot of interviews as well. But to close those opportunities and to perform well from day one, you need the regional context.
yeah. You do need a lot of research. Do need to know the context of um, the consumer behavior or any of the other intricacies and nuances of that industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one. The other thing which I think is, we touched upon this earlier, is the whole financial angle of this,
Mm,
right? A lot of times when you're transitioning back, you don't even know what the right pay would be for you anymore, because you've been paid in a different currency, in a different cost of living environment,
yeah,
right? Now you could say, okay, I'll just either apply the FX rate or I'll apply the purchasing power parity rate and just do that. But again, it doesn't work like that, because every country has different pay levels,
yeah,
and what's competitive in one country may not be in the other. So you need to account for multiple factors in determining what is the right compensation for you in the new countries if you're transitioning back. You don't want to be severely underpaid, or simultaneously you don't want to overshoot too much where you don't get any offers or the right opportunities. So what I had to do in this situation also is get a feel of the market. What is the competitive
Yeah.
market compensation, right? And it's very hard to find because the publicly available data on sites like
It,
Glassdoor,
it
PayScale,
might not be accurate at all, actually.
it's
Some.
not accurate. It's very skewed towards, I would say, people who are looking for that information rather than the actual pay levels. It's usually people who feel underpaid and hence they report their salaries to see the data. And most of the times, I wouldn't say every time, but most of the times, the data is severely, um, it's lower than what the actual
It's
uh,
definitely skewed
market
towards
levels
the
are.
lower end of the
Correct.
spectrum.
So it's not easy. You need to get that information.
Yeah.
You also need to take your personal financial liabilities into account. You also need to sort of have some sort of a scenario modeling, right? Like, for example, if you don't find a job for X months, then do you have enough buffer to? So I think there are multiple
Yeah.
angles when it comes to the financial situation which people need to think of.
Yeah.
And the last thing, in my view, which can be a blocker a lot of times, is honestly just integrating yourself and acclimatizing to the new culture,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, the good thing with me was because I spoke with so many people before I transitioned back to India, they were really able to give me very blunt, candid kind of picture of the on ground reality of the Indian work culture, right? And how it may vary even city to city. Like Bangalore will have a very different culture than,
Yeah.
let's say, Pune, compared to Delhi, right?
Yeah.
So you need to have some awareness of that as well, because it takes time to get along with people, especially professionally, if you are working in a very different environment than what you're used to, right?
Yeah.
Like working in New York in a consulting firm, then going to work in like Bombay and then Gurgaon, to me, it required rewiring myself a little bit, right? And you have to do that because the environment around you would not change, right?
Yeah.
You have,
Absolutely.
yeah, you have tens of clients, you have tens of coworkers or hundreds of coworkers. They won't change. You have to change, right?
Yeah.
So you have to figure out what parts to retain, which help you in your career, what parts you need to adapt to and acclimatize to. So that takes time, right? Nobody can tell you just right off the bat that this is what you need to do. You may be able to understand what the regional dynamics are, but then it will take maybe at least 2 3 months, 4 months to acclimatize to the new way of working, right? So I think, yeah, these are some of the key areas. I mean, I'd love to hear what your experience has been. I think we have gotten a couple of questions as well
I
from the
think.
audience, so we can maybe
I.
start taking those on.
Yeah. I think we should. We can take a look. A couple of questions. One of the questions is: would you say Australia or New Zealand are immigration friendly countries or not at the moment in comparison to UK or USA in the healthcare sector? So we're talking about Australia and New Zealand um, in
Mhm.
comparison to UK or USA specifically for the healthcare sector. Any insights you want to
Hmm.
share there, Arjun?
I'll be very honest. I don't know a lot about Australia, New Zealand in terms of especially the healthcare sector. I
Yeah,
do know that yes, overall, um, currently US and UK have lost the appeal that they used to have in terms of attracting immigration, migrant talent. I think Australia has definitely been much more immigrant friendly
yeah,
country
yeah,
comparatively, even though there have been incidents of anti-immigration protests, anti-immigration laws, but by and large, compared to US and UK of today, I would place Australia above these two countries.
yeah, yeah,
New Zealand is also generally immigrant friendly. We have seen a lot of Indians target New Zealand more recently because of the new anti immigration trends in the West. But I personally have not seen the same kind of volume of migration happening to New Zealand compared to countries like UAE. So, actually, UAE and Middle East is somewhere where we are seeing much more demand from
Yeah,
Indian talent to
absolutely.
go into that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So I would just like to add that Australia has a point based immigration system. Um, and
right.
from whatever I know, New Zealand has, I mean, it has a smaller pool of opportunities. So it's always a little skewed towards Australia in terms of opportunities. I think compared to US and UK, and I think UK has been quite friendly towards the healthcare sector. We've seen a lot of medical workers actually move to UK to work in their NHS. And I think recently that might have changed, and there are definitely some policy changes with respect to immigration. But overall, Australia looks okay. But I think at this point, when we're not able to provide very accurate information with respect to healthcare sector. But Ananya, you might want to look at Australia's point-based system and you know look at New Zealand and try to find out if there are opportunities that you think are relevant to you. Anything you would like to add, Arjun? Any recommendation for Ananya at this point?
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things is like Ananya, obviously, if you're targeting moving to one of these countries, then definitely evaluate them. From what I understand, again, Australia is faring better. There have been elements of anti-immigration even in Australia
Yeah,
and Canada, for example, and Singapore. Like these countries also used to be quite popular, but we have seen an anti-immigrant either trend or legislation here. But compared to UK and US, overall, it's a better market still in Australia. Like I said, I'm not personally aware of New Zealand in a very in-depth manner, so I would refrain from sharing my thoughts on that. But the other thing that I want to highlight here is I'm assuming you're based in India right now, or perhaps you're based in US. You should definitely think about remote opportunities as well, because I mean, it depends on what role are you in healthcare sector. If you're a frontline worker, if you need to be present on ground, then it's a different situation. But if you are somebody working in, I don't know, like, healthcare insurance claims or something like that. So there are a lot of people who work remotely in India or from other countries that are their home countries and still have good job opportunities at these foreign companies, right? So I think, as we were discussing earlier, having a remote role or working for a company which might have on ground presence in your home country as well, I think that could be another way to look at it. It's important to recognize the current trends of anti-immigration and not put yourself at risk if that's possible. If it's not possible, you have to work in another country. Then in that situation, yeah, I think Australia and UAE and some of the other new age markets are the ones better placed. One of the things that I've heard is now Canada has a new um, okay, Ananya has in UK recently got it. So one of the things that I have heard recently is that Canada, with its new prime minister, and also recently they have been thinking about attracting the talent that US is going to lose because of the anti-immigration trends, right?
right.
So Canada, India have had a tenuous relationship over the last couple of years that we have seen. But with the regime change and with the current anti-immigration trends in US, there is a potential that Canada will become more immigration friendly in coming times, but it's yet to be seen.
Yeah,
Um, so I would align myself, if I was you, Ananya, with these countries where the future looks more positive than the ones which are undergoing significant amount of upheaval in the immigrant job market.
yeah. I think we had seen, I think towards the start of, you know, the, towards the start of 2020, some changes in the express entry PR visa for Canada. I think prior to that, there have been cases of a lot of, um, professionals from US facing some immigration issues, moving to Canada, and finding opportunities. Canada also has, historically been focused on some areas. They have some, development areas that they focus on. Ananya, you might want to check out if healthcare is one of the focus areas. There are definitely some codes that you can, apply with that. bring you higher on their priority list. But yeah, I think what you're saying also is, Arjun, professionals can look at UAE as a potential place of work, look at remote opportunities. I think being open to different possibilities and researching will really help. Thanks, Ananya, for your question, and I hope this was helpful. We also have another comment saying we're enjoying the conversation. It is very insightful. Thank you so much. We are glad that you're finding it insightful. Arjun, we have about a few more minutes, and we can, I think, take one or two questions. Um,
Yeah.
I think one of the things I wanted to ask, and touch upon was how can professionals add value to their networks and kind of keep that active instead of just reaching
Mhm.
out when they need help. As you mentioned earlier, that's not going to help anymore, right?
Yeah.
You need to be actively engaged. How can people do that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. See, you can't be in touch with, hundreds of people or even tens of
Right.
people at a given point in time. But I think you can stay in touch with at least 5 to 7 people,
Yeah.
who are working in the industry that you work in. So, for example, let's, talk about product managers. Now, let's say you're working in US and you want to stay in touch with people back in India
Yeah.
in product management field. I think the easiest thing is to just have high level understanding of what's happening in India on the product scene. Like, for example, if there are big regulatory changes in the fintech industry, that impacts the kind of products that can be developed or how compliance is done, and those kind of things in India. So you could just reach out to people who work in that industry or are impacted by certain major trends in that industry, and ask them for their opinion on how they are tackling that. I mean, it's a very simple, 2 3 line kind of an outreach where you say, hey, just saw that India banned the gaming industry, because of uh, the different types of challenges related to that. But you could get a take on somebody who's working in India as to what is happening, how are these companies which have overnight been sort of challenged on their business model, how they're tackling it. It's such an unprecedented situation to deal with, right? So I think that's one easy way to reach out, where you keep tabs through news of what's happening in that country, and then ask people how they are tackling it, how they are being impacted. That gives you a way to reach out to them, but also probably helps you learn more and stay informed about what's happening in that country. um, I think the other thing is, for the 5 7 people, you must shortlist the people whose journeys you find the most appealing, and you can resonate with it, or you want to be aspiring for the roles that they are in. And notice specifically in their journeys, what is it that they have done which you would like to perhaps emulate down the line, or you would like to learn from that experience. So, for example, if somebody has talked about entering a new geography as a market, or they have launched certain new products 0 to 1, but you don't have 0 to 1 experience,
Yeah.
right? So knowing how those people have done that, meaning not just diving into the regional trends, but into that person's
Yeah.
specific career journey, I
Yeah.
think that's another great conversation starter.
Yeah.
um,
Absolutely.
yeah, and then the last thing is, people like to help. That's what I have noticed, that people do like to help others. It's just you have to provide them the right context and right way of helping you. Because
Yeah.
if you just say, hey, help me get a job, it's
Yeah.
very hard for
It's
most
it
people
is.
to
It
do that,
is.
right? But if people say something like, I'm facing this challenge in my own career. Like, for example, let's talk about the real time circumstances of people who are abroad and facing great uncertainty around the future. If you have seen somebody who has made a transition into different countries, whether it's US, UK, India, etc., and you know that you might be in that situation where you have to transition to different countries, just reach out to them and say, hey, I have recently been thinking about my future career path. I'm
Yeah.
unsure if it will be as straightforward as I had anticipated. I see that you have navigated different geographies very well. I would love to understand how you did it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think
That
something
always
as
helps.
simple as that.
Yeah, I think that always helps you know, getting some information from people who have already been there will
Yeah.
definitely help. We have two new questions, so I think we should take them up. One is from Rohan. Uh, Rohan asks, do you think it is okay to apply for jobs in any country other than my home country without studying in that country first?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think there are
Interesting
certain
question.
countries where, yeah, yeah. We get this question pretty frequently actually at Pivot as well. So, Rohan, I think the answer is yes or no, depending on the country, to be very honest, right? Look, for example, um, in US, if we are talking about historical trends, yes, you could do it, and there were many companies that were doing that for their employees through L1 visa, right? So L1 visa is where like a company like Infosys would send somebody from their domestic home base after they have worked for 1 year in India to US for a part-time situation kind of a thing. So there are definitely pathways to work in countries where you don't need to specifically study in that country, right? UAE is a great example of that. Many people go to UAE not for study but stayed straight away for job. um, right, some of the other countries have less fewer pathways to be able to transition to work without studying. But the thing is, it's not about just country based factors anymore. It's about the global anti immigration wave right now. And what you need to think about is not just, hey, can I get a job without studying there? But can I sustain a job in that international country, wherever you're targeting, whether it's US, UK, where you're not going to be constantly, walking through eggshells, trying to figure out whether your career is safe, whether you will be let go, whether a new rule is going to come out that is going to force you to leave the country, right? So these are very real time situations and developing as we speak. So you need to follow that and just figure out whether you are okay with dealing with such uncertain situations. Some people might be, they might say, okay, the worst case situation is I'll come back, so I still
Yeah,
want to try, I'll
yeah,
go. And if it doesn't work, I'll come back to India, right? Because otherwise the only other option I have is staying back in India.
yeah.
So you might still want to try it out, but make a informed decision, right? Don't
Informed.
go into it thinking what worked 5 years ago is continuing to work there today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we touched on two important points. One is it can depend on the country. It can depend on a lot of factors going on, anti-immigration wave, or it might depend on the hiring practices specifically in those countries. The second is that um, you know decide for yourself um, if an immigration led career pathway is something for you. If it is something for you, that's great. And you can always navigate transitions. We've always seen many people do that. But
Yeah.
make an informed decision. One point I would like to add to that, Arjun, is it also depends on your skills and probably your work experience. Um,
Yeah.
we've seen a lot of people land jobs from India who don't have or study experience in a particular country, but have relevant work experience or study experience from another country. So sometimes great a great masters or MBA from tier one colleges across the world help you be mobile, or some skills help you be mobile. I
Right.
think these days AI skills help you be mobile. Great, if you're a great AI or ML expert or a great coder, that helps you be mobile. So it depends
Very
on
true.
a lot of factors, including
Yeah.
skills and your education and work experience.
Absolutely.
So
I think skills even more than degree
yes,
today,
definitely.
Sahiti, I would say. I mean, both factors are important. I agree with you, but I feel like pedigree is kind of getting a slightly less influential in your
Definitely.
jobs and your careers. Like I know people who have gone to UK and studied at Oxford, Cambridge, done their MBAs there or masters there, and many of them were not able to find jobs. And these are very well qualified, highly experienced
Yeah.
candidates, right,
Yeah.
with great work experience also.
Yeah.
And because of the current situation in UK and these other countries, because only because of that they were not able to find the right role and had to come back,
Hmm.
right? And I'm not trying to create any fear mongering here. These are just factual
Factual.
anecdotes, right, that we know of real people in those job markets.
We've run out of time, but we can take one quick question, is if that's okay, Arjun.
Yes, I think we can take one more.
Yeah. So let me just put this in concise words. ML says he just came back from US a couple of months ago. He's been trying to move to UAE for some time now, but he has discovered that they, the
Prefer
hiring
people who are
managers, they
yeah.
prefer people who are already there. What And people keep suggesting him to take a job seeker visa and go there for some time. But what is your take on this? And he also mentions he's been networking as well. So, what do you? Is there any suggestion you would like to
Yeah,
give?
Emil, thanks for asking this question. I know, you're also working with us at Pivot, so appreciate you joining us today. I think in terms of UAE, what you have suggested here in terms of seeking a job seeker visa and going there, that's a very common advice. We have also heard that from many immigration specialists or people who have worked in UAE. And to some extent, that is true. I think you have to look at the sectors that you're targeting. So, for example, UAE is a booming market for finance, for fintech, for banking.
Yeah.
Recently, tech is supposed to now become very robust industry there because of the Stargate investment that has recently happened in UAE. So they are, like Sahiti was saying, they are really going after AIML talent over the last couple of months only, right? Like since I think almost just 2 3 months. Um, if you feel that your specific career goal aligns well with the type of talent that UAE is looking for, especially in finance and in tech, then and certain other like tourism, for example, hospitality and tourism, then I think these sectors are well positioned for people from different countries, and you should definitely try your hand within these sectors in UAE. But if you are somebody who's not from one of these sectors, or there's any sector which does not really have strong existence in UAE, and that is more specific to UAE, by the way, because UAE, even though it's a very successful and booming economy, but at the same time they don't have as diverse of an economy
Yeah, that is true.
as India or as US, right? So they focus more on, let's say, energy, hospitality, finance, and tech, primarily these, right? Little bit of healthcare and all that. So you need to see if there are good opportunities basically within the sectors that you are targeting. And if so, going there and spending time networking will definitely be a positive in my view.
That's great. Emil, I hope we hope that you found some answers to your question. I think we don't have enough time for the next bit of questions, but Rohan, I see that you have some questions about some geographies in specific. If you can reach out to us offline, you reach out to us at Pivot, and we'll be glad to help you out. Um, I
Yes.
think we I think we're reaching towards the end of our discussion here, Arjun. Anything you want to add before we end the session today?
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground. Saiti,
Yeah.
thank you for asking very interesting questions and sharing your experience navigating difficult and different geographies.
Mm-hmm.
I would just leave people with one last thought is that please prepare proactively if you are transitioning or thinking about transitioning to new countries.
Yeah.
Don't only react to the news that comes out. Like if you need to have research some good immigration attorneys, do that in advance.
Yeah.
Don't do it once you're impacted, because it might be too late and they may not have enough solutions for you,
Yeah.
right? um, so whether it's that, whether it's having a plan B, as we discussed, whether it's having a financial buffer so that in case you are let go, you have something to fall back on. All of these things should be thought of more proactively rather than reactively. These situations, at least in the foreseeable future, for the next 2 3 years, while we have the current governments in US and UK, it might continue this way. So please be ready to navigate such situations, and like Saiti and I said, be adaptive, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
all.
Thanks, Arjun. I think it was really insightful today to actually discuss more about the topic of the the hour and the week. And I think
Yeah.
everybody has had really good, feedback for us. They've really enjoyed the session. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us and for your insightful questions. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Thanks, Arjun.
Thank you, everyone.